Good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Ruff. I'm going to speak this morning, really from my perspective as an Afghan veteran with 2 tours in Afghanistan, and share what I've been hearing from a number of my colleagues, Afghan veterans, Afghan Canadians, journalists, and all sorts of people that I've been hearing from and have been reaching out, basically in disgust, embarrassment, and really ashamed at the lack of action that Canada's been taking in the current government to deal with this ongoing situation, the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. We lost 158 Canadians in Afghanistan, and one of the questions a lot of them are now asking themselves, was it worth it? The answer for me is yes, it was, but only if we do the right thing now. We need to step forward. We need to help these Afghans that helped us and Canadian citizens. I know personal people that I've served with that are still in Afghanistan, and they need to get out. They need their help. Their lives are on the line. The Taliban don't play by the international rules of law. They're not a legitimate organization. They're hunting these people down and they're killing them. Canada needs to do the right thing and get these people out. This should have been no surprise to Canadians or our government. This was forecasted months ago when the US announced their withdrawal, and we should have had a plan. So I'm calling on the government to do the right thing and get these Afghans and these Canadian citizens out of Afghanistan immediately. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Afghanistan has fallen to the Taliban, and the Kabul airport is completely surrounded. Now, the United States military controls the airport complex, but the Taliban could challenge that at any moment. We have unknown numbers of Canadian citizens and many Afghan interpreters and support staff trapped with no way out. Embassy staff are gone, and consular communications with those Canadians and Afghans left behind is barely existent. Thousands of Afghan support staff and their families have been waiting with their bags packed and passports ready for weeks, in some cases months. We have Canadian Armed Forces assets, troops, and cargo aircraft capable of extracting everyone in the region, but the planes that are returning home now are half empty, while our people in Kabul desperately hide from the Taliban until Canada is ready to pull them out. Now, Conservatives have been imploring this government to reestablish the pathway for Afghan support staff for years, but those pleas fell on deaf ears. The government must act, and act now. Minister Mendicino, Minister Garner, Prime Minister Trudeau must give direction to the military to land those planes and rescue all our people before it's too late. Our men and women who served in Afghanistan are telling us daily their interpreters and others are in grave danger. Their houses are being broken into by the Taliban. They're dodging Taliban checkpoints to show up at the airport only to be turned away. They are burning all their documents connecting them to Canada because they know they will be killed if they are caught. Every day, the narrow window of opportunity to evacuate to Canada grows smaller and smaller. Our troops who served in Afghanistan understand this better than anyone, and they would fly there themselves to pull these people out if they could. Bureaucratic support staff cannot direct a military mission. Now, the Canadian Armed Forces are the best in the world at this kind of operation, and they're ready to go. But they need a prime minister who will actually give the orders. Unfortunately, Justin Trudeau has been naive, disinterested, and apathetic when it comes to our interpreters and support staff in Afghanistan. Thank you.
The Taliban is a listed terrorist organization in Canada. Public Safety Canada describes the Taliban as an Islamic fundamentalist political movement in Afghanistan that uses terrorist attacks, including the extensive use of IEDs and suicide attacks, to further its political objectives, and has been known to carry out a number of attacks on girls' schools in particular. The Taliban has a long-standing history of brutally eliminating political opponents, civilians, and enforcing a system of oppression on women and girls. Think The Handmaid's Tale, but more violent, more cruel, and more sadistic. They've also given safe haven to other extremist elements like Al-Qaeda. Yesterday, analysts on Canadian television, like my colleague Mr. Ruff said, described how the Taliban in recent months, since the announcement of the planned withdrawal of American troops, have been rapidly claiming control over rural outposts and bases that have been vacated by American forces. So there's no excuse for the Trudeau Liberal government to express surprise about the humanitarian situation that is happening in Afghanistan as we speak, even though that is the exact wording Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister used yesterday. Let me be clear. As I speak, judicial officials, elected officials, political moderates, collaborators with allied forces, women, girls, and sexual minorities are at extreme risk of death and torture at the hands of the Taliban. Today is a day for empathy and for action. With reports of upwards of 30,000 Afghanis fleeing the country per day, the world could be facing a refugee crisis of Syrian proportions in short order, and there is a high risk of all women in Afghanistan being subjected to extreme gender-based violence. The time to prevent future atrocity crimes in Afghanistan is today. Currently, Conservative incumbents are also receiving a high volume of frantic calls from constituents and NGOs with family members attempting to flee Afghanistan. Their lives are in danger and they need an immediate response from the Liberal government. However, we are receiving out-of-office emails and disconnected phones from Liberal ministerial office staff who would normally handle these requests, because I suggest that some of them may have taken leave to work on campaigns. This confirms media reports that the public service, currently in a caretaker mode due to the election, is facing challenges in managing Canada's response to this humanitarian crisis. Further, the Liberal announcement on Friday that they would bring 20,000 Afghans to Canada was misleading. There were reports within hours of this announcement that the embassy had shut down all communications. The fact that they made this announcement without telling Canadians or Afghanis how they would follow through on this promise while the Taliban were on the doorstep of the capital of Afghanistan is shameful. The humanitarian crisis unfolding in Afghanistan will quickly become one of internally displaced persons. That is, people who are unable to leave the country due to the rapid and unchecked resurgence of control by the Taliban. These are very similar conditions that preceded the Yazidi genocide in August 2014 by another local terrorist group. Almost 7 years to the date of this genocide, at-risk persons in Afghanistan are facing a same type of fear. Never again means taking actions before atrocity crimes occur. The time for Canada to act in this humanitarian crisis is now. And that is why today we are calling on the Trudeau Liberals to do the following. By the end of the day, communicate details of their resettlement announcement to the Canadian public. This should include application process details, process for security screening, and more. Establish a hotline for Canadians with family members in Afghanistan to call to get information on the government's resettlement process. Prioritize highly vulnerable persons who are at risk of death and torture from the Taliban for resettlement in the first instance. And that means people that are in Afghanistan right now. While assessing the safety of those who have already reached UNHCR refugee camps outside of Afghanistan, we need to be reaching vulnerable persons in Afghanistan today. Work with NGOs, civil society groups, and others to establish a plan to evacuate highly vulnerable persons within Afghanistan for the purpose of resettlement, and formally commit unequivocally to not recognizing the Taliban as a legitimate government, and more importantly, encourage the international community to do the same. As well, to keep people in the loop during this election, we ask the federal Liberals to hold daily updates for media on the status of the resettlement program. Thank you.
La situation actuellement en Afghanistan est terrible. Et n'oublions pas qu'il y a un lien très étroit entre le Canada et l'Afghanistan. 40 000 militaires du Canada ont participé au combat et ont soutenu humanitairement les Afghans durant plus de 10 ans. 158 militaires ont perdu la vie et des milliers d'autres vivent encore les séquelles aujourd'hui. Mais aujourd'hui, nos frères d'armes, afghans, traducteurs, interprètes, chauffeurs, cuisiniers, ceux qui nous ont aidés pendant nos opérations, ont besoin de nous. Nos militaires canadiens ont tissé des liens étroits avec plusieurs d'entre eux. Ils demandent expressément au Canada de les accueillir comme réfugiés avec leurs familles immédiates. Il est temps que le premier ministre Trudeau, que le ministre des Affaires étrangères Garneau, que le ministre de la Défense Sajjan, ainsi que le ministre de l'Immigration Mantino, sortent de leur campagne électorale et s'occupent activement à sauver la vie à ceux qui nous ont accompagné fermement durant 10 ans de combat contre les terroristes talibans. Et jamais un gouvernement conservateur ne reconnaîtra un gouvernement taliban. Et aujourd'hui, il est temps d'aider ceux qui nous ont aidés.
Well, as the Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs, it's been an incredibly emotional 5 days for Canadian veterans. I've been dealing with Afghan veterans who have used their resources, financial or otherwise, and their contacts to try to keep those who have helped our Canadian forces stay safe and to extricate them from Afghanistan. The situation is critical and dire as the safe houses and security that our Afghan veterans have provided at their own expense while fundraising have collapsed. You can imagine the anxiety that many Canadian veterans are feeling. Bonds were built with the Afghan nationals who helped our troops, and there's grave concern for their safety. I'm hearing stories, as many of you are, about the Taliban hunting down those who have helped foreign governments, including the Canadian government and our troops. And over the course of the last several days, I've been providing lists of Afghan families to Minister Mendocino, provided to me by our veterans. The names on those lists have been vetted and they are ready for extrication. Our veterans are asking that the Canadian government, and in particular the IRCC, work with them directly to assist in helping to extricate these people and their families. And all across Canada, the group of Afghan veterans have also been coordinating and preparing resettlement plans within our communities to assist with housing and work. Locally, I've been in contact with Barrie community leaders, those within our Afghan community who are prepared to help and are willing to do so. We just need to get them out as soon as possible. And I'm asking on behalf of our Afghan veterans who I've been working with over the course of the last week, who are really engaged, but also extremely concerned about the fate of their loyal friends and their families who are still in Afghanistan, that the government focus on working with these group of veterans to help the Afghan nationals and their families who've helped us. Thank you.